Hello, everyone. Welcome back to It's Not Britain's Hangout Hour. It's another discussion of. I'm here with my friend and partner in crime at this point, Jason Fuhrman. How you doing, sir?
Great, man. How are you doing? I'm ready to talk about some cannibalism.
Yeah. Now we were actually having a discussion on how cheese would be made in this world. So if anyone has any interesting thoughts on that, feel free to let us know in the comments. But if you didn't
Mhm.
gather, we're talking about this kind of the second part I'm doing of Tender is the Flesh, which is actually a book that you recommended to me, Jason. You were like, man, this book is just, mwah, you know? Or you recommended it on your channel. I don't remember if you actually recommended it to me, per se.
I don't know. Maybe I did. I think when you were bringing up the books you were going to read for October,
Oh,
I
yeah.
might have suggested it for that. I think I don't remember, but either way, I've talked about that book a lot. I really love it, and I should probably read it again.
Well, it's kind of awkward now that we're actually sitting down and talking about it. But, excuse me. Yeah, we're talking about Tender is the Flesh today from Agustina Bazterrica. I already made a video discussing some of my initial thoughts, so now I'm here with Jason to kind of go into a full spoiler talk, I guess. I'm going to be talking about the themes and choices that Bazterrica makes. Again, I apologize if I butcher your name. Um, but yeah, Jason, you really liked this book, and I was like, man, this is really messed up.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what that says about me as a person. Do you feel differently about me knowing how much I love this book and now that you've read
No, I know you like some twisted stuff. It's all right.
it? But it wasn't the twisted nature of it that drew me to it. I mean, I guess kind of like the concept of it was I was like, "Oh, interesting." But really what pulled me in was the writing and the explorations of the themes, I think. Not so much the grotesqueness of it, right?
Well, yeah, you're not a complete psychopath.
I like that. Yeah, not completely.
um,
Maybe I'm more in the sociopath territory, not quite psychopath.
um, but yeah, Tender as the Flesh is it's really it's how do I put this book? I kind of described it in my. I was trying to be as vague as possible with my review slash discussion video, but it's basically about a world where animal meat has become poisonous to human beings, or well,
Hmm.
allegedly it is. So now people have resorted to cannibalism. So here we are. We follow Marcos. He's this guy who he actually works at one of these plants that kills people, but he can't fully shut off his conscience, or well, that's what I think anyway. As we get through the story, we kind of we see different dimensions to him. But yeah, it's more of an exploration of this world and how it affects people. And to be all honest,
Hmm.
if someone did want to commit suicide in this world, I'd find it very difficult to blame them. And that sounds like a really horrible thing to say, but here I am. What do you think, Jason?
I mean, I think I don't know. As a species, right? Every species, will do what it takes to survive. So I guess you have to ask yourself, like, could you acclimate to such a world, or would you become like a vegan? I guess, right? Because I think if I remember correctly, aren't there some people in this book who do not eat the flesh of others? Like and I
Yeah, they
think
like
Marco
they like
himself,
throw.
right?
That is one of my issues with this book is there's not really a lot of pushback that we see. Like we do see the people who there's this one part in the book where this guy finally just couldn't take it anymore and tried to free some of um the heads is what they call them. And then
Hmm.
he failed, but he ended up committing suicide not long after. Um, I do. It's more just I feel like there would be people who would be like, "Hey, this is really messed up. we probably shouldn't be doing this. Like, I know we're in a really precarious situation, but cannibalism's just wrong.
Do they? It's been a while since I've read it. Do they give a time frame of when this started? I think it's ambiguous, right? Like they
Yeah, if
didn't give a
I don't remember
timetable.
I don't remember them talking about a specific time when it happened.
So I think that to me is why I guess it doesn't bother me in that regard because we don't know. So that's why I feel like it's almost like the lack of pushback makes it more interesting to me. Because to me, that seems to be like the obvious course, right? Like even hypothetically, Marco, the protagonist would be the one who like, I'm over it. I'm gonna be, on the inside, I'm gonna stop this thing. Like to me, that's kind of a stereotypical story. Or maybe he's part of a group of people like a resistance, right? We always love having the rebels versus the
Well,
overlords.
sure.
And so
I find that kind of story would be kind of generic as well, but my thing is I would expect some pushback. Yeah.
well, I mean, I think there's to me, Marco, is it Marco or Marcos? I can't remember.
Well, it's
Um,
Marcos in my copy.
Marcos. Okay, well, it's Marcos then. So Marcos is like you can tell it's unsettling to him, but he's in a situation where he lost his child, which means he lost his wife, and so he's kind of just this kind of aimlessly wandering, right? This landscape, and he's at a job where he's I don't think he works at a plant, but doesn't he like oversee like a bunch of these plants? Like he has
Yeah,
to
he's
go
like the
from plant to
right
plant
hand
to kind of
to the big guy. His name is
right.
Craig.
That's right. That's right. And so the cool thing about it is that Basterica or Basterica, I don't know how to pronounce her name, but she made it more interesting to me because not only is he at the forefront or at the center, I should say, the center of this, disgusting industry, but he's also conflicted because we know that he's, first of all, he's upset because of his life situation of his wife and his child, but then also, and I remember, I think I remember he in the book does not eat flesh, right? He
No, he
eats.
doesn't.
He's
No,
like,
not
I'm a
for a while.
vegetarian or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, he for whatever reason he can't bring himself to, or well, I think it's because his kid died, but at the moment he can't bring himself to actually eat human flesh. And again,
Right.
there's this kind of cuts to the it kind of cuts to the kind of my issue with the ending is I I might actually read this again at some point. I don't know when I'll do it, but this is one of those books I'm gonna reread at some point. But it kind of like it fit the story well because this because as I mentioned in my previous video on this book, this book is sort of a exploration of the banality of evil, basically. It's not necessarily that Marcos is sadistic or, you know, he's not like the hunter people. He's not like a psychopath. He's just going along without really thinking about what he's doing. Or if he does, he can just shove it down.
Yeah.
Which might be even more disturbing if you think about it, but
Well, that's what I enjoy about it. It's that a lot of times in life, like let's take something of a lesser issue. Like let's say you're married, you got 5 kids, you're overwhelmed, like you don't really love your wife anymore, your kids are annoying, your job sucks, but it's kind of like you have to you you can't step away. You can't step away from this life for whatever reason, right? Either
Sure, yeah.
either you feel an obligation or there's fear or something like that. And so that's kind of how I view Marcos is that he's in this terrible world with people that do terrible things, but not only that, but he's part of this process,
Mm-hmm.
and he has a tragic story of his own. So you have to ask yourself, like, what's your breaking point? Like, when will you say, this is enough? I'm breaking free and leaving this life.
Like
So if you equate it to something, go ahead.
continue what you were saying.
Oh, I was just saying, like, if you compare it to something that's less grotesque, right? Like let's say you have a bad marriage or you have, a shitty job or whatever, and you're like, man, I could just quit, but you don't. Why don't people quit their shitty jobs? It's the same. It's the same thing. Granted, we're dealing with a dystopian world full of cannibalism, but if you take it to a lesser degree, because it's normalized in this world, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
basically like he has a shitty job, and why doesn't he step away from this? It's like why doesn't anyone step away from their shitty jobs? For
Well,
whatever
sure,
reason,
yeah.
many people many people continue to live this subpar life. I know plenty of people who are like that, where you can tell they're not really happy, like in their relationships or their job, but like they keep waking up day to day and doing it. And I think that is what's cool about this book is that she created a protagonist that is part of this system that isn't is kind of resistant to it, but doesn't act. Right? They're a lot more passive in the situation,
Well,
and so that's
sure.
what made it very relatable to me.
That's why it's not. That's why I say banality of evil, because it's not really. Well, I described what the banality of evil was in my video. Just basically, like, think of Nazi Germany. A lot of the people who ended up being tried, they weren't like these, evil monsters. They were just people, who just
Hmm.
who didn't think about what they were doing. They just kind of went along with it because, for whatever reason, I don't know, but it's almost like they didn't think of if it was, or maybe they even knew it was right and wrong, or they didn't care. I don't know what it is. It's still it's one of those concepts that kind of
Well,
baffles me.
well, I mean, or you really have to put yourself in that situation because if you were to take, Nazi Germany, for instance, and if you don't participate in the system, you could be the one that who's ends up the target, right? And
Sure.
so that's kind of a lot of people become cowards and that cowardly in that regard where they don't want to resist the majority
Yeah.
because they'd rather have their own life and try to maintain some kind of level of life, and they delude themselves into thinking like they're not doing evil things, and I think that's to me who Marcos is like he understands what he's doing. He's sickened by it, but he's also stuck because he's like, what's the alternative? He's not a hero. So like
Yeah.
what else would he do? Like where are you gonna go? Like this is the world. This isn't just like one country or anything. There's no escape.
Well, I find it kind of gets undercut by the ending, but I don't want to get ahead of myself.
Oh yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about the ending with you because we haven't had a chance to actually chat about that. But yeah, let's not go quite that far yet.
Um, well, Marcos has his dad who's suffering from dementia. His wife, if I could guess, she basically had a nervous breakdown of some sort after her kid died of what I assume is SIDS. Um, because basically how it's described is that he just one day walked in and it was dead. So, um, SIDS is what I would guess.
I
Um,
mean, SIDS is basically just a label for we don't know why the kid died, pretty
yeah, pretty
much.
much.
That's all it is. It's just like a,
Yeah, kid just
but yeah.
up and dies, and they're like, well, but his sister, who's just a bitch. Like, sure, I've had obnoxious family members, but my God, his sister is just awful. I hope none
What
of
did
your
you feel
family's like
about?
that.
No, but back up a bit. You were talking about his dad who has dementia. He's in like a convalescent home.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the cool thing about that scenario where they had to be guarded because, old helpless people are kind of a target in a
Yeah.
way for
Mm-hmm.
it's like kind of a I don't want to call it a black market, but I guess it's kind of a black market human flesh where to me that was cool as how she would take these things that are all too familiar. That's what's great about this book too, is like if you take out the cannibalism, there's still a good story there, right? There's the tragic guy Marcos who lost his wife, lost his child. He's kind of just stumbling through life like a zombie. He's got a
Mm-hmm.
father who, is at a convalescent home. His sister's a bitch. Like, I don't know, you have these great elements of characterization, but then she adds that extra layer of cannibalism and it's like, okay, well, what if what would old people be like in a cannibalistic society? Like, what would that be like? And she explores that, and that's another thing that was fascinating about the story to me is that, or we can talk about it a little bit later, but the sport. Remember how people would, if they like accrued a lot of debt, they
Mm-hmm.
would go to these people and they're like, "Hey, if you escape, we'll pay off your debt." And so there are these hunters, hunting these like celebrities and whoever it might be who've accrued these unpayable debts, and
Mm-hmm.
they try to like, get into this kind of weird battle royale kind of situation.
Yeah, like a Hunger Games
Um,
battle royale type of thing.
Hunger Games, yeah, yeah, and so that's what's cool about it is that she's equating things we're very familiar with. Not that people hunt other people, but like, there's plenty of situations where somebody goes into extraordinary debt and they get into trouble at like the mafia or whoever it is, and fixers are coming after
Mm-hmm.
them. So it's like, and then another one of my favorite parts too was the scientific studies, because like in
Yeah.
reality, like in modern times, how
I like how
you
Marcos just has none of it. He's all like, "Good God, get me out of here now! I don't want to be
yeah.
here."
Yeah, because it's cool if you think about it. Because right now, when we're testing vaccines or medications or anything like that, it's always on animals. It's like on mice. We do scientific studies on mice and
Mm-hmm.
dogs and apes and all kinds of stuff like that. But hey, in a world where people are food, isn't it awesome that we get to like use actual people to test these drugs and stuff to see what happens? So we have a one-to-one comparison of what the result is. It's not like this, well, it worked on a mouse. Maybe it'll be the same on humans? So you skip the
Yeah.
entire animal trials sequence of scientific study. It goes straight to human study, and that part really stayed with me too when I think they took the baby from the mother and they were just trying to observe like what
Yeah.
would happen. Wasn't that was it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and he's like, "Well, what the fuck do you think's going to happen?" And so that's what's hilarious is that everyone is so disconnected from people. Like people are so disconnected from the people that they don't even view them as people. And so they're wondering like, "Okay, what would happen if we took a child away from its mother?" It's like, "Well, just imagine what would happen to you because you're the
Mm-hmm.
same fucking thing." But there's this separation still. And I think it just again it really adds to the world she was trying to create of how we can like acclimate to these things, how we can
Very,
separate ourselves from.
very
Yeah,
Holocausty.
yeah, yeah.
Mingle or whatever that guy's name was. If I remember, they actually call her that in the story. If I remember right, I could be a little off.
I don't remember. I
Um,
wish it's been a little while since I've read it, but I wish I would. So I guess
my
you could remind me of some of the
my
details.
my favorite part was Marco with the puppies. I was
Yeah.
just like, man, because I remember I was actually on Reddit reading some other interpretations of the ending because again I don't want to get ahead of myself, but um, one of the comments that really stuck with me is that it's almost like Marcos is in grief of the world before. What do you
Yeah,
think about
I can
that?
see that. For the ending?
No, 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 no. I mean, do you think that Marcos is like grieving for the world in general?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think his child was kind of the catalyst, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we never get to see what Marcos was like before his child died. So I think that's the key. That's kind of the key thing about why the ending works for me, which we'll get to, I'm sure. But we never get a sense of who this man is before he's already befallen tragedy, and so it's hard to know. Like you can guess, like you said, and maybe he's mourning what humanity used to be, but it's like we don't know. But the ending does kind of illuminate that.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like you say he's almost like a ghost or a zombie just kind of walking around doing his thing. And I guess what really unsettles me about this book is just like the clinicalness of it. Like if you don't mind me reading the first page here, which I
Yeah,
know
go
you
for it.
did on your reviews, so I guess I should jump in on this. Carcass, cut in half, stunner, slaughter line, spray wash. These words appear in his head and strike him, destroy him. But they're not just words. They're the blood, the dense smell, the automation, the absence of thought. They burst in on the night, catch him off guard. When he wakes, his body is covered in a film of sweat because he knows that what awaits is another day of slaughtering humans. Is like
The beautiful chapter or paragraph.
I know. I was like, woo, you know. It's like that through the whole book, you know. It's like, I don't mean to laugh. It's horrible, but it's just like, well, not the book isn't horrible. Just the situation is. You're just like, oh my gosh, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the beauty of that paragraph is it does so many things. It's establishing, it's doing the world building, and that final line, preparing for another day of slaughtering humans. Like that's kind of just that's the final punchline. Whereas the first sentence or first words, multiple sentences, I guess, because they're singular words or singular word sentences. Like carcass, stunner, uh, all that. It's basically like it's the cadence of processing,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like you see like a line of these calves or these cows or I guess in this case humans on these hooks on an assembly line, and they're just kind of like kill, move on. They stun them, they bolt their head, or they bolt them in the head, they move on, they cut them up. It's like that's what's so great about that paragraph is it's like boom, boom, boom. It's like this repetition.
Yeah, I would agree. But I think that's what's kind of unsettling about this book is that it sort of, it kind of that clinical, just like, oh yeah, this is how it is, you know?
Yeah, that was purposeful, and I think that's the whole point. Like you want, right? You want that kind of clinical, disturbing nature to a book like this.
Yeah. Now I know we kind of disagreed on this, but I could see that she was kind of going for, I don't think it's, like the point of the book, like, oh, look at how we're treating these humans. Well, how about you think of the animals next time? Nothing like that, but I do think there is some parallels between the animal factory industry or meat packing industry, whatever you call it.
Factory farming, I guess, or
Mm-hmm.
the meat industry. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you could definitely. I mean, to me, that's the most obvious observation, right? Because we're literally using humans as food in this case, and we're
Mm-hmm.
slaughtering them just like we do cattle. But when you really read the book and you get to the end and you see all of the layers and the elements, and you see that it's sure she may have been saying something like that. I feel like though, in my reading of it, she was almost using that as like a way to divide the men from the boys, essentially, for lack of a better term, where, on the surface, people are saying, oh, this is a commentary on factory farming and da da da. Those are basically the people reading on the surface, right?
Mm.
Whereas if you actually dig into this text and really live with these characters, you can see she's saying so much more. So,
Well, I
yeah, I
mean,
mean, there could be.
well, I'm not saying that's like the whole point of the story. I think the whole point of the story is like, look what type of fucked up shit people can get used to.
Yep.
And
Yep.
and don't get me wrong, I can definitely see how some might say the concept is a little absurd, but I mean, I could definitely see this happening in some way because when
Well,
people get really desperate, they tend to do really desperate things and murder.
yeah. Well, I mean, think of all the terrible things we've done as a species, like throughout history.
Well, yeah.
We look back 1,000 or 2,000 years and we're like, oh my God, like, can you believe we owned people? Can you believe we, did this kind of thing? And it's like, yeah, we did it without blinking a fucking eye most of the time. And so I don't think this book, though, to me, I know a lot of people would criticize it from a logical standpoint, like, well, why this or this biologically doesn't make sense. It's like, I get it, but this is not about
Kind of
that. This book
nitpicky.
is not about that. Yeah, it's not about like, oh, would this logically happen, or would industry work this way, or would people actually accept this? It's like that's not what it's about. Like it's not about the realistic nature of this situation. So yeah, I can see people critiquing it because yeah, she doesn't go into a lot of depth about again how long has this been going on? How is it even possible that certain animals, like except humans, are affected by this mysterious disease, or aren't they, or are they, like you mentioned, and not humans? Because we're all mammals. Any kind of mammal you'd think would have. There's definitely cross-species contamination. We know that for a fact. So, but again, I think if people are complaining about that stuff, I mean, they're not. Those kind of people should read like a hard sci-fi book or something. Like they're reading the wrong book because that's not what this is about. So I think it's unfair to critique it on that point.
No, I agree. I think it's yeah, I think it'd be kind of missing the point. It's more about, to me, though. I mean, I kind of had I did have some of those kind of like, for instance, like I mentioned before, I did expect there would be a little more pushback. There would be people like, "Hey, this is wrong. We should do something about this," or like how animal rights activists exist. But you know,
Yeah.
not now you could just write that off as she wasn't really interested in writing about that, and that's fine. But that was just something I kind of noticed. I was like, everyone's just so down with it. It's not really just kind of. It's just that's kind of what kind of bugged me, and I guess that's intentional because it bugs Marcos as
Yeah,
well.
that's the beauty of it though, because I think, like you
Again, until
said,
the
like if you
ending.
had that stuff. Oh, I think you had some lag.
Oh, I said
What were you
until the
saying?
ending.
Yeah, exactly. But I think I would not like this book nearly as much if there was a quote unquote resistance. If
Well,
there were people who were really bothered by it. Because to me that's so expected.
I think like a resistance would be tacky, like a Star Wars type of shooting them up and freeing the humans or whatever, and I'd feel that'd be kind of stupid. But I would expect like a scene or two where it's like, oh, there were some protest groups or something today, something like that, like we have
Didn't
in
they
our
have
world.
didn't they have that?
Well, they do
Weren't there
mention
people?
they do mention there were some people who just decided to be vegan because they just couldn't get down with it, but that was it.
Yeah. Okay.
Not
Yeah, I
really
couldn't
like
remember.
I didn't really hear any like people binding together, because even in times where there were mass atrocities like the Holocaust, like Soviet Russia or slavery, there were people who were like, hey, this is wrong, we should stop doing that, and a lot of them died, but that's beside the point.
Yep.
But I guess that's a point of the novel is that Marcos is so bothered by the fact everyone's down with it, and he's just like, okay. Um, but again, it's why the ending bugs me a lot. But again, I don't want to get into that. I'm trying to save that. But yeah, clearly Marcos can't shut his conscience off. You know, like there's some people that are described who are just kind of like they're able to kind of shut it off, and you know, and then there's some people who are just psychotic. Like that one guy who's like filming everything just for his own enjoyment. And they're just like, good
Mm-hmm.
God.
What about the now remind me, because it's been a while since I've read it. The people who were like crazy, like the feral people.
Oh yeah, like the religion. Yeah, the religious
Was
people.
that it? And
That
they would
cult.
like,
Yeah.
was that it? Where they would like raid the trucks, and
Oh
stuff,
yeah,
and
the
they would
scavengers. Yeah.
the scavengers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ow. Yeah, that's just. I'll just put it this way: the scavengers are basically just the people who aren't lying to themselves. They're just like, you know what? We're gonna survive. We're gonna eat all these people, and you're just gonna like it. Fuck everybody. We're just gonna or we're number one. And there's a part of me that's like, you know what? I kind of respect the honesty of that deep down, even though it's terrible. But I guess that's I guess that's another point of the book is that a lot of these people kind of just lie to themselves. What do you think about that, Jason?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to know because we're really always in Marcos's head, right? So we only get his perspective.
Hmm.
And it seems like most of the people in this world, the people he encounters, they've fully disassociated from what they're doing. They fully separated themselves. And so that's why Marcos is such a great POV character, because not only is he, you know, he's not okay with what's going on, but he's he's part of this process, which to me it fully it even more emphasizes his how uncomfortable he is with his situation. But yeah, I mean, I think you have Marcos, and then you have most everybody else who are they've accepted it. They've deluded themselves. Maybe they're lying to themselves. I don't know, but it's hard to know, because at what point are you just convincing yourself of something versus truly accepting it? I guess that's the one thing we never know, because we can't read minds, right? We can't look at somebody. Like, I could ask you a question. I could say, "Hey, do you believe in Ghost Britain?" And you could say, "Yep." And I don't know if you're being truthful or not. Like, I just have to take you at your word at some point, because I can't read your mind. And so when we're talking to these people and seeing them act, eating human flesh and not caring about the whole thing, are they truly okay with it? Or are they just, again, playing this, they have this facade? I don't know.
Yeah, it was never really explained because we only really see it from Marcos's perspective, and uh, Marcos is interesting because like he's not really, again, he's kind of stuck in this place that he hates. Because he wants to take care of his dad. His sister's not really doing anything about it, and he's just kind of stuck. And his wife is also, um, again, I'd say she had like a nervous breakdown or something of that sort.
Yeah.
But again, he can't really like. He's constantly like smacked in the face with just like, oh yeah, this is a thing now. You know. I guess it kind of goes back to like I thought at least with the ending it would be like he dies or like he just has enough and he just like shoots himself or something like that. I don't know. He seemed like he was about to either go on a killing spree or just off himself. I don't know.
It's a very similar ending to 1984. And I have to believe that she was somewhat inspired by the ending of 1984.
Yeah, I could
It's
see that.
very, very similar. Very, very similar.
I could see that a little bit, but I felt there was. Again, I'm
It
trying
seemed like you
really.
really want to talk about the
I'm
ending. Do you want to talk about the
I'm
ending? We
trying
can't.
really hard to like talk about the rest of the book and not talk about the ending yet. The ending will probably take like a chunk of the video anyway. But what are some other parts that really got me? Oh yeah, how they dissect the humans again, just in that really clinical like, oh yeah, here's how it's done. Here you go. Also I also like the motif where he lies in sweat. Hold on, let me find the line. Let me find it. When he wakes, his body is covered in a film of sweat. Like that's if I remember, that's used at the beginning of the novel. Well, I know it's at the beginning of the novel, and at the beginning of the second part, they use the same. Like she uses the same line again to show that he's not really comfortable with the whole thing.
Hmm.
He's not down, Jason. He's not down with the. And I think what's funny with his sister is I've known people like that. People who just like do trends for the sake of it.
Do what for the sake of it?
Trends. Not and that sounds
Oh.
bad. That sounds bad. Like I don't know if it's necessarily you could call cannibalism a trend, but it's just kind of like it's kind of like I've met people who are just that vapid, and are just like, oh yeah, there's this thing now, and Marcos is like, oh god, why? I don't even like
Hmm.
being here. And, oh yeah, Marcos is also. I guess he's. I guess he's banging this butcher lady, this really creepy butcher lady who I'm like, Jesus Christ, Marcos, you need to like try masturbation once in a while, sir. My God, stop hooking up with psychopaths.
Well, there's
What
one thing you haven't brought up yet.
what did you think of the creepy butcher lady, Jason?
Oh, I liked it. I mean, I thought it was great. I thought it was
You liked
didn't wasn't she
you?
was an older woman. She was a little bit older than him, right? And didn't wasn't there some discussion about her knowing him when he was like a teenager or something like
Something
that?
like that,
Like
yeah.
there something like that. So there's this weird like Lolita kind of vibe going on. But he kind of
Yeah,
gives into it as an adult and she's this older woman and it's on the
it's
slaughter
so
table too.
weird. It's so weird. Like
Yeah. It's
I,
weird, but
yeah.
it adds to the tone, man. I can't. It's funny, man. I cannot really think of a flaw in this book for me personally. I think it's
No,
just
like what did you
there's
think when he like busts in and just like fucks? Like, I mean, like fucks. Like he just he just like fucks the shit out of the lady, and he's like, I hope his assistant's watching. I'm like, what the fuck is this?
well, what do you think about the subtext there, though? I mean,
I know
there's
it's
subtext there,
again,
right?
it's really fucking creepy. It's like
It's almost like him treating her like an animal. It's almost you could almost view her as sort of the proxy for the industry and everything.
yeah,
And he's like, I'm gonna fuck them. I'm gonna fuck her or
what a
whatever,
fuck.
and I hope they're watching me fuck her, kind of thing.
Yeah,
It's his small way, I think, of and again, it's been a
flipping the
while since I've
finger.
read it, so I could be missing. Yeah, yeah, it's like a big middle finger. Exactly,
Oh
exactly.
yeah, and don't let me forget the my partner in crime, Cat. Let's not forget the domesticated human herself, Jasmine, as a matter of fact, who's one of these head. They call them head. They're just people, which always threw me off.
Like,
Always threw me off because I'm just like, what? Oh, yeah, okay, that's what that means. You were
yeah, they
saying
call
something,
yeah, it's
Jason?
like how we call a head of cattle, a head of cattle. That's why.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting about this woman, though? Why somebody gifted him
Oh yeah.
this quote unquote head. She's first generation pure.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we know in this world that they breed, right? They breed
Mm-hmm.
these people to be certain ways, right? To be
Not
stupid or whatever.
not unlike animals, of course.
Right. So she's first generation pure, meaning
Mm-hmm.
she's like of original stock.
Uh-huh.
She's not like this bred over and over and over again for consumption. She's like prime steak.
Yeah. Yeah.
But therein lies the dilemma, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he's got a woman.
Uh-huh.
She's technically basically a head of cattle, but he falls in love with her, right?
Or
He
does
views
he?
her as, or does he? Right? But he views her as a real person, not a head of cattle, even though that's what she is in this world.
Yeah.
And so therein lies the biggest dilemma of the entire book because he gets her pregnant, and we all know what that means in this world. You're
You're
dead. Like Marcos is a dead man if they find out.
basically
Um,
committed this world's version of zoophilia. Just
yeah, pretty much.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Although I feel like the implications of or the consequences, I should say, are quite different. If you
yeah.
get caught banging a cow, you're probably not going to be murdered, or
Well,
executed.
unless you're in India, probably not.
Yeah, right. But I mean, in the United States, let's say, presumably this society is she's an Argentinian writer, so I'm guessing it's Argentina. And the interesting thing about Argentina too is they're massively into beef. Like that's a big
Hmm.
part of their culture. So yeah, I hear Argentinian steaks are some of the best. So that's what also I'm sure and surely inspired her to write the story. Um,
Yeah, so he basically keeps her as like a pet girlfriend. I'm not sure. When it got to
yeah,
the
well,
he starts banging her. I'm like, yeah, because it's like I'm like you're technically because like she's basically has like the intelligence of like a kid. So it's just like you know. I felt just like it was kind of revolting, you know.
I
Again,
can't
I'm sure
remember.
that's
Do
not the point.
they don't speak, right? Or they can't speak?
Yeah,
They can't speak language.
they
They
got
don't.
their
They don't.
they got their vocal cords
That's right.
cut.
That's right. But yeah, well, that's the great thing about the story. Another great thing about the story is that yes, he bangs this quote unquote cow, but which means he's seeing the humanity in her, right? He's not viewing her as this as like as an animal. But then on the other hand, she is an animal in this world. And so he has this dilemma of like, he gives in to to his weakness, and we see Marcos's true kind of colors to a degree. Or to
Mm-hmm.
me, the way I read it is he's trying to, he lost his wife, or he's estranged from his wife, and he's trying to find that connection again. And she is the thing that, or the person who potentially is going to fill that role temporarily, even though he knows it's a bad idea. He goes through with it anyway because he succumbs to his desires and his just yearning to live a normal life. Have a
Mm-hmm.
wife, have a kid, stuff like that. Even though he chose the wrong individual, clearly.
Mm-hmm. If I remember right, like they had like issues having kids. If I remember right, him and his wife.
Yeah, I think after, I can't remember if it was it before or after. Did they try again after the kid and then like just nothing was happening, or was it
I
like he was the
think it
golden
was
child?
like before, and then they had him, and they're
Okay.
like, um, yeah, I think so. But
Okay.
I should note on a little digression. I'm sure everyone. I bet India would just be thrilled because they have like cows are like sacred to them. So I'm like, oh yeah, it's great. Now we can't
I
eat
wonder if
humans.
this book is available in India.
I don't know.
That's what I want to know.
I'm, I don't know. They might actually pass it around and say like, see, look at what these meat people, they'll eat people, or something like that. I don't know. That was really bad. I apologize. But yeah, he starts banging Yasmin, which again I'm like, okay, that happened. Also, there's this
Hmm.
like really creepy, just like, bro, that's like a kid. I'm sure that was intentional.
How young was she? I don't remember.
She was like in her 20s, if I remember right.
Okay. And it's never really disclosed how old Marcos is. I could only assume he's sort of maybe in his 30s or something. It's kind of tough to even really know.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, I'd say he's in like his third. I don't even think they say. um,
Yeah.
he's in like his 30s. He likes visiting the zoo a lot because I guess that's like his. I guess that's like his safe place. I don't know.
Well, he had some memories, right?
Yeah, him
Didn't he
and
have
he
memories of
remembers
going
stuff
there?
with him and his dad. Um, and he almost there's a point in the novel where he says it's almost a mercy that his father got dementia once this started going down because he would just, which is so fucked up. But at the same time, I'm like, you know what, Marcos, I don't blame you there. That's how bad this is.
Yeah.
God, there were points
Yeah.
in this novel I'm like, I gotta put this down and just make me a drink and just like, okay, back to the saddle.
Yeah, you're making me want to read it again. Talking about this, I really want to because yeah, this book had a really big impact on me. There's very few books that have a big impact, and this was one of them.
You like dystopian stuff,
And
don't you?
yeah, I do. But I think what pains me the most about this book is that how so many people like didn't get it. They thought it was purely a gross out, book, that there was no depth to it. And it's funny too. I don't know if you've watched. You should watch the review if you haven't of Better Than Food book
Yeah, I
reviews.
remember. I was about to bring that. I remember you were particularly irate about Better Than Food's review on this book.
Yeah, he basically read it as like a cheap gross out book. And I'm like, you're missing the point. I was like, I bet you if you found out this book was written in like 1935, you'd be all over it, dude. He seems to not really think there's any modern writers can have anything interesting to say for the most part.
Well, he likes Cormac McCarthy.
Yeah, and he actually liked The Devil All the Time,
I was about to say,
which
yeah,
is
he
a
liked
very
Pollock,
kind of
didn't he?
grotesque novel too. Yeah, he likes Pollock from what I've seen. I think he's only read one of his novels to my knowledge, but that's what I mean. He's incredibly inconsistent with a lot of times you can see you watch people's reviews or discussions and you're like, okay, I can see how this people view or how this person views literature, like across the board. He's kind of all over the place because there's some books that he praises, and I'm like, that was a piece of shit. I don't care who fucking Hemingway wrote it. Like it was boring as fuck. But then he'll like talk shit about another book, which I'll be like, wow, it seems like you completely missed the point of this one. So again, I know reading and
I saw he
anything like
covered
that's
Dune, but I didn't see that review. I was curious what he thought
yeah,
of it.
I didn't watch it either because I fucking hate Dune. I wanted to like Dune so much, man. Like I love the aesthetic of the films and the setting and but man, I once I finally read it, I'm like, yeah, this book sucks.
Yeah, to be
From a
honest,
story standpoint.
to be honest, I had the same issues with the Villeneuve movie that I had with the book, which is just too much world, not enough story to like justify it. You know. Oh,
Well, that's the problem with the story. Is it's all world building, it's all philosophy. It's very, very little character. Like the characterization in the book is incredibly thin.
it's also
And
over
so I feel like
explained too. I'm just like, I don't like having
yeah,
everything explained to me.
right.
My God.
Exactly. Exactly.
Now in the
Exactly. And that's why go ahead.
oh no, well, finish your thought there.
I was just gonna say, like, that's why I'm absolutely amazed that it's so widely loved because as an actual story, it's pretty dog shit,
I mean, you know,
Like
people like the world buildy stuff. You know.
yeah, but I need a story. I do too. Like I appreciate a well thought out world, but like give me like a story. And
Well,
that
yeah.
just really didn't have a story to me for me anyway.
Well, I was going to cut back. You know what has better characterization? Tender as the flesh. Just
Yes,
that was a
by far.
great segue. Um, but yeah, no, Tinder is yeah. What else? Yeah, he sometimes calls his wife because Marcos just like he's he's just a mess, to be honest with you.
Yep. He's a big mess.
I mean, he gets frustrated, bangs people when he gets. I know one of the things I like is how like his sex drive is defined by like his emotional state. I like how like his first thing he does when he's like super upset is like just go violently bang the creepy butcher lady, and then
Yeah, what
bang
does that say about
this
Marcos? I wonder.
he's a thirsty boy. I don't know. You read this book a while ago. You've thought about it more than I have. What do you think?
Well, he's it's not about yeah, it's not so much his sexual drive is not about sex, right? Like I said,
Yeah,
I
I thought it
think
was more
if
about
I
like
were
catharsis, like emotional
yeah,
catharsis.
exactly. It's about it's almost like violent in nature. Um it's not at all about sex. At least that's my reading of it.
Yeah, I kind of took it more as like a catharsis thing rather than just like he's a horn dog.
Yeah, exactly. That's the
um,
thing about this book is even though it's dealing with very I don't know, just visceral content, um, you have to look beneath that, right? All of that stuff is just a vessel for something else. And
hell,
I
he
think if you
borderline
can't
rapes
see
that
beneath
lady.
that, yeah, but she kind of likes it, doesn't she?
Yeah, I know. It's the weird thing too. She's like, she's kind of into it. It's really again that
Hmm.
scene is so bizarre. Um,
Yep.
um, yeah. What else happened? His dad does eventually die, and he's like, okay, this. it's over. Let's cremate him. And he's like, why? He's like, I don't want people stealing his body parts. Which is interesting. I like how they kind of play with, like, oh, so you're fine with going along with people slaughtering other people, but, like, oh, no, not my dad, you know. I mean, I get it on an emotional level, but at the same time, you're like, it's interesting, Marcos. It's almost like she's making
Again,
making a commentary there about
there you go.
about double standards. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really just
Yeah. That's the beauty of this book for me anyway.
yeah, I mean, she couldn't
Is
make it
that
more apparent when he has his like tantrum at his dad's funeral. He's like, "Why don't you
yeah.
people just think for yourselves?" You know, and then he leaves,
Mm-hmm.
and then gives her the fake ashes because out of spite he decides to part the real ashes because he doesn't want his sister having it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. There's so many levels to this book, man.
yeah,
It's almost like
yeah.
he
Marcos
took
is kind of a
all
drama
the
queen,
facets of life.
To be honest with you, he's kind of a drama queen
A
at
drama
times,
queen?
a little bit. What do you?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, he's kind of acting out though, right? It's like he's he's acting out because it's his frustration with his life and the way the world is, right? It's everything. It's he's projecting all of that onto the people around him.
Yeah, he's almost like one of the things. Like he's almost like on a cusp of a mental breakdown in certain points of the story. Because I thought that's where it was leading to. Like he's finally just gonna break and I don't know, do something. Well, I guess he did when he's like, I'm gonna bang Jasmine. You know.
Yeah, that was kind of a break, I would say, for sure, because he knows the consequences of that. So
Yeah.
that was somewhat of a break.
But I guess I was expecting like he would just get like pissed off and start like shooting people or something. I don't know.
I'm
Shoot
glad that
him,
didn't happen.
shoot him,
I'm
shoot
glad.
people, shoot himself. Just kill everybody. I don't know. I was expecting something like that, but it doesn't happen though. But I do like
Mm-mm.
that scene where he's finally like, you know what? Fuck this bullshit, and he basically tells his sister like, go fuck yourself, and leaves.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because I love how his sister's always freaking out about like, oh no, the birds might shit on you, and he's like, it's not gonna, doesn't fucking work like that. Jesus Christ, and leaves.
And it makes you wonder, like, I know you talked about this earlier, but do they think, is this virus a real thing?
I know,
Or is this all like for some weird control, like,
because they mention a few times like there's like a government conspiracy, like
mm-hmm.
which because like when he comes across the guy kill the teenagers killing the puppies, they're like, oh, it's all bullshit because the government, whatever. They mention that a few times, which is why I bring that up. So, what if it is some sort of fucked up thought experiment? Like, let's see how far people will go, which would make this book even more twisted and disturbing. But, maybe we'll find that out in the sequel.
Oh, I hope there's no sequel.
I don't know. I feel like you could make another story in this world. Definitely.
Yeah, you could. The one thing I don't know. I'm always, as much as I love this story, it's hard for me to know if I would like a sequel because there's something great about it just being this one story. Like when you further explore the world, it kind of takes away from it to a degree. At least that's my opinion. I think that's why I tend to enjoy standalones more than I do series because you extend this story out for so long, it kind of just dilutes the experience for me sometimes. It has less power, like there's power in brevity.
Sure. But yeah, he finally is just like, you know what? Fuck this. I'm leaving, and that's when you think he's gonna have like a breakdown or something. And then well, is there anything else to talk about? I don't know.
Yeah, there's one more thing.
Well, aside from the ending.
The Oh, aside from the ending, no, I think we've covered it all. We've covered the sex scene with the butcher lady. We've covered the um,
The
the
funeral.
people, the celebrities who have incurred so much debt, and they go on this weird like Hunger Games kind of thing to try to get the debt paid off. So we have that. We have the sex with the head that he's
Uh,
gifted, and then the pregnancy from that. Um, the experimentation on humans, right, for
mm-hmm.
medical purposes and psychological reasons. Those are, and then obviously his father and dealing with someone with dementia and like someone at the end of their life. Like, what is someone at the end of their life in this world like? And
Mm-hmm.
that's what that is. Those are the biggest points for me, I think, in this book,
Oh yeah, there's
for
a
sure.
couple of jerk ass teenagers who kill puppies. So if you're squeamish of
Oh,
animal
yeah.
abuse, don't read this book. Because I've met some
Well,
people who are squeamish about animal abuse. So yeah, there's a really sad scene where puppies get murdered. So yeah, if you don't like animals getting hurt, don't read this book.
I feel like if you're
If you're
squeamish
not
in any
already turned
regard,
off by the cannibalism, if you
yeah,
don't like puppies getting murdered, then don't read this. I'll
yeah,
admit
I
it
think
wasn't fun reading about the puppies. I was like, I
no,
want him to
but
go
I
over there
think
and fucking murder those kids, like you know.
if animal death is a problem in fiction, there's so many other reasons why you shouldn't read this book. You're probably definitely not the right person to read this book.
Maybe I'm also deep down a psychopath because like there was a part of me I'm like, Marcos, you should just go over there and fucking murder those those three guys. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't
See what
know.
she's doing?
I don't know.
That's what's always been funny to me, is how like so many people are okay with human death, but then like animal death is like, oh, I don't. That's a
Well,
place I don't go. I'm like,
animals are
what?
kind of well, domesticated animals are defenseless. And there's some animals who are like, fuck you. You know, like,
Yeah, there's
nature
plenty
ain't
of animals
friendly.
that could destroy. Yeah, there's plenty of animals that could destroy us. But I equate it to like, killing a puppy would be like killing a baby or something
Yeah,
in
I
a
know.
book. And to me,
Exactly, yeah.
like, I mean, come on, guys, it's pretty terrible killing the baby as well.
I think most people would have the same reaction, like, oh, fuck that. No baby murder. Now, I'm not saying I enjoy reading those things. It's just, that's just kind of, that's an interesting kind of, you know.
Well, yeah, I know everybody reads for different reasons. I don't read for to make myself happy. I know a lot of people read for, oh man, I have a shitty life. I want to read something heroic and uplifting, and that's fine. I don't read for reasons like that. To me, a lot of times, granted, I love stories too that have happy endings. I'm not against a happy
Well, do
ending, but
stories make you
if
happy, Jason?
everything, do what?
Do good stories make you happy, Jason?
It's kind of funny. It's like it's not happiness like joy, but it's happiness because because I write books and stuff, and I love storytelling, and so when something is done like really fucking well, that makes me excited. That makes me the writer, the storyteller, the lover of storytelling in me extremely happy. And so it's hard to call it happiness or joy, like sort of like a generic emotion in that regard, like a feel good thing. I wouldn't say it's a feel good thing, but
Well, and yeah, I was being
yeah.
silly.
But yeah, I don't read for that reason. I know a lot of people do. A lot of people like to get to the end of a book or a movie and say like, "Oh man, what a nice story." That's not me.
Yeah. I do like being challenged. I have a weird masochistic thing where I like to test my limits, and this book definitely did. So I guess now we can go into the thing I've been kind of holding back on, the ending, which kind of settles on why I think this story is about the banality of evil, but also it kind of comparing to another book I've read which did a similar trick. I feel this book was I don't want to say bad, but kind of rubbed me the wrong way, I guess, in a weird way. I know you were kind of like, "Hey, the ending's not that bad, guys," on your review that you did.
Which book? This book? Or you
This
mean
one,
talking about another book?
this one,
Oh, I thought you were
this
saying there
one.
was another book that had. No, it's not bad. And it took me a second. So yeah, it kind of hits you. You're like, what the fuck? I didn't see this coming.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of
And
like,
then
so
you start
after
to
all this
think about it.
angsty bullshit you've been peddling to me this whole book, you finally just are like, thunk. Well, she was like an
Yeah.
animal. It goes like
So I
psychotic in the
talked,
last like 5 minutes. You're like, what the fuck happened? Like, what happened to all the angsty
right.
soul searching? Like, what the fuck is this?
Well,
But
again, it's think of 1984. What
yeah,
happens
but
in
he got
1984?
tortured.
Yeah, but still, like, yeah, he got physically tortured, but he kind of became part of the system, even though Marcos is pretty much part of the system. I wouldn't say it's exactly the same, but like the outcome is the same, right? The outcome in 1984 is, he loved Big Brother. The outcome of Marcos of Tender is the Flesh is that he got his family back. That's all he wanted. He wanted a normal life, and so he got his wife back. He got this head of this first generation pure pregnant, had a baby. He had a baby. Like you said, he and his wife are having trouble having kids. This could be the solution to his all his problems, and a switch in his head flipped to see her animalistic again. And so this kind of goes back to the Reddit thing you were talking about, where is he mourning what this world is, right? And I think the ending of this kind of answers that question in a bit, or in a little way, in a little bit, because once he has his family back, he everything else doesn't matter. Nothing else matters. He sees this woman as an animal, not a human being, and he kills her. Even though, like throughout the entirety of the book, you think like, oh wow, he's actually he's loving this woman like a human. But then he switches back at the end, right? He kind of the world overtakes him. And I talked about this in my review in the spoilery section, but the reason why this really clicked for me is a friend of mine who I won't name, but he'll never watch this video, I'm sure. This was years ago, like 20 years ago. He was with this woman who is now his wife, and they absolutely just were at each other's throats. He was like, I can't do this anymore. She fucking sucks. We need to get out of this. She's a terrible person, etc., etc., etc. He finds out she's pregnant.
Well, tell me how he really
Then the
felt,
next,
Jason.
yeah, well, it's not me, it's him. Um, he finds out she's pregnant. Guess what happens? Everything's hunky dory. Guess what happens next? They get married.
Oh,
Okay,
jeez.
so this to me is why the ending of this book works so well. It's that he was miserable, just like Marcos is. But when he gets this thing, now granted, Marcos, the story is a little bit more compelling and tender as the flesh because he lost a child. So he really wanted this child back. He wanted this wife back. Whereas my friend, he he was like just he didn't want to be with this person anymore. But the second something changed to where like, oh, we have this thing that we can share that will bring us together, this child, all of a sudden everything's amazing. Everything they love each other, everything's perfect. I'm like, dude, the other day you were talking about how you hate this person. And now all of a sudden you've done a 180. And so because I've experienced that in my life, I could absolutely see Marcos' shift. And it really illuminated kind of what he cared about. And I don't think he he's just kind of a victim of society. He's a victim of this world he finds himself in, and his
Hmm.
emotion, his desire for having a child and his family again, trumped any kind of humanity he had, right? "Quote unquote" humanity, I guess. So that's why it works for me. Um, that's why anybody who doesn't like the ending, I would love to talk to them and give them that story because I've seen it happen firsthand. Granted, not in a cannibalistic society, but I've seen people fucking turn on a goddamn dime, like, and it's mind-boggling how the human mind can just switch like that. How they can, even though they know all this stuff, now everything's perfect again. I'm like, because of this one thing, and that's why it worked for me.
Well, I guess that makes sense, and that kind of feeds into this story about the banality of evil. But I'm like, so what? Marcos just doesn't care as long as he gets what he wants. Is that what she's saying?
It's I think it's deeper than that. It's
Because Because that's
it's
kind of what
almost
I
like
got.
he's to me it's almost like it's furthering his delusion, right? So you have to ask yourself, was Marcos disgusted with the way the world was because he wasn't happy with his own life? And so that illuminated all of the ugliness of the world? Or was he actually, grossed out by the world he lived in? And then by
Maybe
the end of the
both.
story, you see, right, yeah, by the end of the story, you see that there's a sliver of hope, right? He gets a child back. His son is back. His son is
But
alive.
at
His
what
son is no longer dead.
cost, though?
Right. His wife is there. So he turns a blind eye to everything else, at least for that moment. And I think that's what I love about the story too, is that there's no like 10 years later, there's no epilogue. It ends in that moment, that moment, because a lot of times these switches that are flipped on our minds, they're instantaneous. They don't last long. Like my friend right now, definitely not happy in his marriage. Still, 20 years
They're still
later,
married?
they're they're still married, but again, out of convenience, which is kind of like goes back to the stuff I was talking about earlier about like these people in their shitty jobs, their shitty relationships. Why are they fucking still there? Like I've asked him, I'm like, why are you with this person? He's like, oh, my kids would fall apart if, we separated, and financially it works out, and there's always a fucking excuse. There's always an excuse except for their happiness. And again, that's why this story works. I think when you've known a lot of people and have more experiences, you start to see these patterns in life and what humans are capable of. And I think that um, that's why this book overall works for me. But then also the ending too, as abrupt as it seems, and as disappointing as it might be to a lot of people, because they wanted him to fight back, they wanted him to become human, whatever that means. He kind of folded, just like the guy in 1984. It's sort of this like, oh
Except
shit, like he
Winston
lost.
basically got tortured.
Yeah,
He was
again, I'm not
mind fucked, if you remember.
right. He was mind fucked, but also so was Marcos. Like Marcos was mind fucked. He was
He
mind
still,
fucked
he
by the
still, he
fact.
still chose. That's the thing with Marcos. He still chose to do that.
Did he though? Like I guess it depends on how you view the human mind, right? Like if you how you view um, free will, right? Essentially as well, because there's been some interesting studies out there that kind of demonstrate how our perception of reality, or us sort of making a quote unquote decision, lags behind the impulse that creates it.
Well,
So,
either that or he's so
um,
broken and disturbed, like he just decides to deal with this lie, basically. And
yeah,
basically, his
well, I mean,
wife
it's
goes
just,
from like broken woman to psycho in like 2 minutes. You're like, what the fuck is this? You know? I don't know.
yeah, but when
I don't know.
you,
It just
again,
kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. Not, I didn't
no,
think it was bad.
that's the
I think
point.
it, I think it, I think it serves the story well. It just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Just kind of like, oh, so after all this angsty bullshit you've been doing this whole book, you just do a fucking switch around because you got what you want. Like, fuck you. Go die.
That's the point. It's not supposed to be this like, ending,
Like
wrapped up in a
like
bow.
murder them and take the baby, and I'm like, fuck you. I'm out of here. Fuck all you
That's
bitches.
yeah, that's the point. The story is a tragedy, and that's why very few stories are tragedies, right? Most stories are comedies. There are uplifting, the hero wins. That's the kind of stories that most people gravitate to, because when you have a story like this, like 1984 or Tender is the Flesh, it does not going to have mass appeal because it does not end the way that the human mind wants it to end.
Well, how
And
does
I
well
think
how does
that's
how does Marcos get mind fucked? Like that's what I want to know because you said that
well, he
because
gets mind fucked in a positive way.
basically
The tr
Winston gets his choice taken away from him, but Marcos makes choices throughout this. He's still cognizant of
Sure,
those choices. That's
sure,
what makes
Winston
him,
kind
in
of,
my opinion, evil. That's what makes it the banality of evil because he's still evil, but it's like unthinking. He how do I put this? It's the same thing as ow. it's like he doesn't even think like of her as a human being. He never thought of her as a human being.
I would disagree with that. I would say when he's
It
with
was
her,
just a means to an
she's
end, basically.
she's kind of like, well, no, I don't think he premeditates this thing. I think he gives in to his impulses of she's a proxy. She's a proxy for what he's lost. And he has sex with her. He gives in to these emotions that he has, right, to make himself feel okay. She gets pregnant as a byproduct of that. So now he's like, what the fuck do I do? Holy shit. Like he realizes he's in deep shit. And then at the very end, there's the solution, right? The solution is, oh, his wife will like, yeah, okay, this is our kid. We'll just kill her and da da da. Da. But again, it's not like this. It's not really like a premeditated thing. It's kind of like just an instant, an immediate switch. Even though
Yeah, I
his
would agree with
wife
that.
is yeah, his wife is more like, oh no, whatever, she's an animal. Who fucking cares? But he's like, he's not that way. But then once it happens and everything connects to him, with him, or for him, it's like, boom. It's just like a flip is switched. It's like the last shred of his humanity has been torn away essentially, and now he's like everybody else. And so that's why I don't view him as evil. I view him as just like he's now become part of the system. Because when you have, it's kind of like the I Am Legend question: who's the monster? Is the last man the monster, or are all of the rest of the population of the world the monster? So in this case, everybody's cool with breeding humans and eating them, right? So what? He's just part of that system now. Now we don't want him to be because we're not part of that world, and we want to see this resistance. We want to see him fight back, but he ends up being part of that world. And so I think evil, again, if you're into like, objective morality and stuff, that's a whole different question. But I'm thinking of it as more as like relativism in this regard, because if it's no longer deemed as evil, like if society doesn't deem it evil anymore, is it evil? And I think that's the whole point. It's like
Yes,
he was an outsider. Yeah, he was an outsider. Now he's inside, right? So
but
I don't know. That's
going back to the mind fuck thing. Like, how was he mind fucked? Like, explain yourself.
he's mind fucked by the trigger of the child, and the glimmer of hope that he can have his family back. That's what fuck that idea, that fantasy that he's romanticizing about, is completely overtakes him, and it basically overtakes anything else, his humanity, whatever you want to call it, to where he views this woman as mere cattle again, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the trigger. Now, Winston in 1984, like you said, he was tortured. Marcos is not tortured, but it's the same kind of impulse. It's some kind of outside force that flips you like a switch. And that force is the child and the hope. His wife's there. Everything's fixed. Everything's back to normal again. It kind of goes back to when I was talking about my friend. His relationship was in shambles. The child shows up, or the knowledge of a baby. Everything's miraculously fixed like that. Like fuck, I'm telling you, dude. It was like the difference between 2 days. Like one day he calls me, I'm fucking done with this. Da 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 da. The next day, we're getting married. She's pregnant. I'm telling you, dude, the human mind is fucking weird, dude. And I think that's again
Yeah.
why this is so believable to me. Um, and you're like, what? Like, so I'm the reader of Tender as the Flesh, going like, what the fuck? You just told me you hated her, and now you had a baby, and now you're getting married, and everything's perfect. What kind of world are we living in? That's exactly what Marcos is doing. Um, it's an outside force again. Like I said, it's not something that he premeditates. It's just like it's so quick, it's so abrupt, and I think that's why it works. If it were premeditated, I feel like it would be a weaker story, because when you have this like intent, right? You start to mull over things in your mind, and you have this intention. Oh, here's what I can do. I can have my wife. I can kill her. We can have the baby. But because it's like a switch flipping, that's what makes me think it's just like this. It's just the weirdness of the human mind, man. How we can like again, it kind of echoes back to the theme of the entire book and how we can acclimate to something so terrible. He's literally acclimated to it at the very end too. Like he was disgusted by it, and then he acclimated it by the mere fact that he has his child back and his wife back, and that's all it took.
Well, I think
So
that's what makes him evil, per se. Because
if you want to look at evil as
he's
like this
so
outside thing,
because he's so
sure.
quick to drop his angst
I would say fragile.
once he gets something he wants back. I'm like, that doesn't
I,
make
I
you good.
I would say it's fragility. I would say it's weakness. I wouldn't
I would
say
agree with that.
it's evil. I wouldn't say it's evil. I mean, if you want to look at evil as an outside force or something, but to me, evil, it's more like premeditation. I feel like if you're premeditating something, then you can make more of the evil argument. Whereas if something's like it's like a traumatic event. You know how some people have a traumatic event and they're just like a completely different person after that?
Yeah.
That's how I view what happened to him, but in a positive light because he's getting his kid back and his wife back. So it's not a negative thing, but it drives him to do things that are beyond what he could probably normally do. Like he couldn't eat meat throughout the whole book. He was disgusted with the world, and or was he? Right? I think that's the question. She's asking a question like, was Marcos really empathetic to the situation, or was he just pissed off because he didn't have his wife and he didn't have a kid anymore? And really, that's the source of his
Malcontent.
his mental state. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I don't know, and I think that's what's great about this book is asking these questions. Like, there's nothing explicitly answered, and
And given
when everything's
if his qualms were real, like what would happen along the line? Do you think he would eventually just lose his mind?
you mean if like this situation never happened, like what would happen?
No, no, no. I mean, like once he gets settled with the kid, starts having his life, but that guilt just
Yeah,
eats away at him.
I think so. I think that would be my guess is that the cycle would continue. This thing that happened that he thought was going to bring him happiness, very similar to my friend, right? When he found out his girlfriend was pregnant, that he thought this is going to bring us happiness. Yeah, so I feel like if you had a an epilogue of Tender is the Flesh, I feel like the best epilogue you could have would be Marcos is back to square one. None of this solved this problem. And like you said, the guilt is eating away at him. That's how I view it. I think that's what it should be. I don't think it'd be like, oh, Marcos is just evil and like he was faking the whole time and
I don't
this
know
was like
about
a
that.
surrogate to his.
It's not necessary. I think, well, in this world, he's surrounded by evil, you know? And also, evil's easy, if that's, you know.
Yeah, but again, I think that you have to
I mean, why worry? Like,
if
why
you're
have all this angst and worry when I just have this thing and I can be happy and not worry about it, you know?
yeah, but again, you're looking at it through the lens of objective morality, whereas I think that it's interesting to think of, okay, well, this world, everyone's like this. Therefore, what is evil in this are eating people evil? I don't fucking know. Everybody else thinks it's okay. Like at what point? Because it's all relativism. At some point, it's like at some point we thought owning people was okay, right? Nobody had a problem with it, and then we started being like, man, this is fucked up. Maybe we shouldn't do that, And then now, we definitely don't do that.
Well,
So
yeah.
like why did we think slavery was a-okay? Why it's in the fucking Bible. God even's like, yeah, be nice to your slaves or do this to your slaves. I mean, it's like we were okay with it back then. Like absolutely positively fine. I mean, it's in the good book. And now we look back and we're like, holy shit. Like we own people like animals. And now you even have like you can even extend it further beyond like the whole vegan movement where they're trying to give human rights to animals, right? They believe that we're all equal, and so that's kind of the next level, I think, of where we're headed, like in terms of ethics and stuff. Like, where does it end? Like, is it a species? Like, is it a species level thing, or is it like no, everybody is equal because why shouldn't a cow have the same rights as a human? You know. So I think that's we're constantly shifting the goalposts from with ethics. Like how where does it end, Who knows? Maybe 300, 400 years from now, yeah, we're not eating animals at all. We're all eating some kind of fucking sludge made in a lab and who know? I mean, you don't know. Like at some point, the way it seems like the way the world is going is that um that's the way it's probably going to go eventually, but Not for reasons, not for ethical reasons. It's generally monetary reasons, which makes me, part of me would love to talk to her and figure out like what's going on behind the scenes. Like what did you have an idea that you didn't put on the page of like why the world is this way? Was it a conspiracy or was it a real disease? But
She
part of me
probably
doesn't
wouldn't.
want to because
She probably wouldn't answer that. She'd probably be like, I don't
yeah,
fucking know.
yeah. Well, I feel like even if she knows, she's like, I don't want to tell you. I want that question to be in your mind because that's part of the power of the book. And that's why I said part of me wants to know and part of me doesn't want to know because I like the I like the speculation.
Well, sure, yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember I was sort of facetiously giving you shit because there's another book I read that I really enjoyed. It was one of my favorite books last year that I read. I got you to read it, and it kind of does a similar thing. Gone to See the Riverman by Christopher Triana, except it's not about cannibalism. It's about people who are obsessed with serial killers, which um, in the way in that book that is a real thing that has happened with people like Richard Ramirez and Ted Bundy.
Hmm.
Generally if they're
Yep.
attractive. And
Yeah, like Ted Bundy. Yep.
yeah,
Which is funny. If you look at Ted Bundy, you're like, he wasn't a very handsome dude. You look back at him and
he's
you're like, really?
pretty good
He,
looking dude.
he, he was all right, but I was like, I don't know. I pictured like a Brad Pitt looking guy or something. I'm like,
Well, okay,
okay,
he's not
I
Brad
could
Pitt,
see.
but
Yeah, he's not even close. So I was shocked when I finally saw photos of it. I'm like, what? I was like, all right, girls, whatever floats your boat.
uh, I guess it's just sort of. I felt it was more built up in that book. And I'm like, so this fucking. So you would take a guy just fucking 180ing at the end of the book, and while in Gone to See the Riverman, it is like from the very beginning there is this sense that there's something off about this person.
Yeah, kind of, but I think in Gone to See the Riverman, why it didn't work for me is that yes, it was explained that this protagonist was fucked up. Like when you're in the flashbacks, you start to understand her life and where she came from and why she's just a terrible person. Um, but it didn't. I feel like Triana didn't give me the breadcrumbs in the present, right? As we know her, when she's like visiting this killer in prison and getting this little quest and going on it, like it's never really seeded because those are the kind of stories I can appreciate when it is revealed who this person is at some point, right? Um, but it was just like, hey, here's this girl who likes serial killers. She's going on this quest. We're kind of like, this is fucking stupid. Like, why are you doing this? Like, there's no, I don't know. There
Yeah,
was no
I
like,
told you, I explained this to you already. She's bullshitting herself throughout the entirety of the book.
but again, but there needs to be clues. You cannot have, uh, you cannot have nothing and then say, ta-da, here's why she is. And that's exactly what it was in this book. They're like, ta-da, flashback, her fucking her brother. That's my whole point is that there was
Spoilers for
nothing, because a
Gone to
lot of
See the
times,
Riverman, by the way.
yeah, so it's like it wasn't, to me it was lazy because I think revealing a character through flashbacks is absolutely lazy. And
I
that's how he did it.
disagree, but whatever.
That's fine. I mean, we can disagree. I just think it's like it's so fucking easy to do that. It's so much harder to do something like Fight Club where you're like I have to make this story make sense once we get to the end and you can look back and see all the hints versus like, oh, I'm just going to show imagine Fight Club told in such a way where we have the narrator and then it's like, "Oh, we see him like chapter 2 or chapter 3 or whatever it is." Um talking to himself and all it just breaks the whole fucking beauty of the
Well,
story, and
yeah,
that's what gone.
Gone to See the Riverman's doing a different thing. It's saying it gives you what I think makes that book good is that it gives you like you have this expectation walking in. You're like, okay, this lady's gonna be fucking crazy. Well, then you see it and she's like, okay, maybe she's not that crazy, and then you learn, oh, she is that fucking crazy, and
When did you
that.
think she was not fucked up? That's what I want to know.
Well, it's kind of
I
hard
thought
to.
she was fucked up. That's the whole point problem I have too is that uh she goes to see the serial killer she goes to dig through this fucking corpse. No big deal. Yeah, let's do it.
Well, if
I'm
I
not even
remember,
really that grossed out.
there are points in that book where it's like she is gagging, if I remember right.
I feel like, well, I remember when I read that point, that part in the book, I was like, no fucking way would somebody act this way unless
To
they
be
were
fair, she is
absolutely
like
fucked.
gagging. Like, I mean,
I mean,
that might not be
it
enough for
wasn't
you.
enough. It wasn't enough for, and I think that's the key thing is like whatever Triana was doing was not enough.
So,
It
like,
was not enough to
explain to
sell me.
me how
Sure.
Marcos at the fucking last second goes, "Oh, I'm just gonna go along with this now, even though I've been angsting for the past 200 fucking pages of this novel."
Well, I've explained that to you
Well,
already.
yeah, I
It's
know you.
because the
I know you told me.
fragility of right, the fragility of the human psyche, and I would definitely, I agree with people who it kind of hits you and you're like, what the fuck? Like that was a stupid ending.
It's like
But
The
then
Sopranos.
yeah, I it took me a moment. It took me a little while to think about it. And luckily I had that real life experience with somebody who did fucking flip a switch in like a bizarro way. Granted, he's not living in a cannibalistic society, but it's still the same kind of thing where you're like, what the fuck? Like how are you changing your mind like the literal next day? Like everything's great, everything's sunny. And because I experienced that, it kind of really reminded me that wow, the human mind is really fucking fragile and really able to completely delude yourself or itself. And that's why it worked for me. And because this grant, I mean, Gone to See the Riverman to me was not written at the same depth of this book as this book. This book was exploring all kinds of themes, has all kinds of commentary, um, even aside from the flip switch or the switch of the I can't even talk. The switch, the flip of the switch. There we go. And I don't know. That's why it worked for me. Again, I can understand why it wouldn't work for somebody, and that's why I like to talk to people who, like you yourself, you're like, ah, I fucking hated that ending. What? This didn't work out the way.
I don't hate the ending. Like I said, I think it's fitting for the story, but it's just kind of like that. You know, you're like,
That's why
okay.
it works though. Because if it wasn't like that, if it was premeditated, like you said, then it
Well,
would be like, well, this is fucking stupid.
well, I mean, I'm not saying it should be premeditated. I think that would just be kind of, I don't know. That would just be kind of, that would be predictable.
Yep. But I
But
mean, I
it,
guess
if it were premeditated, I think it would be predictable. But it's just with this, it's just kind of like you're doing the same thing, and it's just kind of like, okay, it just fucking happened. That's it.
yeah, I mean that's the beauty of the story, man. It's just that it's like, what? Like it catches you off guard at the very end and you're like, what the fuck just happened right
But
now?
going back to Gone to See the Riverman, it's like, again, like you've told me before that like you really like to delve into what the, like, I don't know, something like this, like you like to delve into what the character's thinking. Like I
Yep.
like you have to see in Gone to See the Riverman, like her denial is so just like she's, I'm telling you, she's bullshitting herself, man. And maybe it's one of those things. It's just like we just react to it differently. But like it's kind of it's turning into a Gone to See the Riverman discussion. But I think I'm bringing this up because I find that both of these stories are doing similar things. Like it sets up this one thing, and then it's like, oh, here's this, like here's what's really going on. You know, that's why I bring it up.
No, I hear you and I understand. It's just that yes, she was bullshitting herself, but you know how when you read a book that has an unreliable narrator
Yeah.
and you're like you can read between the lines and see what's going on and you're like, I didn't get that from Gone to See the Riverman. I didn't get that depth of the unreliable narrator getting in the head of this person where literally the character itself cannot see what they're doing, but still they're laying the groundwork or the breadcrumbs for us as the reader, as the outside observer to see and be like, "Oh shit." So that's what to me was not in that book, and that's why it felt just kind of like a I don't know, just kind of a mixed
Well, I
bag.
I guess my point I was making is that her bullshitting is so convincing to a point, at least for me, where you almost kind of believe it at first, and then he takes it away and he swipes the rug out from under you, or that's
I
how I
guess I
took
just
it.
don't. Yeah, I guess that's what I just didn't get the bullshitting. I didn't read again. The bullshitting to herself is like that's the reading between the lines thing. I just didn't really see it. It wasn't very strong for me. So again, I think it's like more of a
Well,
what's
this to be fair, this was
enough
more of
for
a
you?
hindsight thing as I thought about it, and
Exactly.
you know,
Right. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like you can't again, I don't think I'm ever I don't I rarely ever read a book where I'm trying to figure it out. I don't like to read a book that way. And so I wasn't really but sometimes when I'm reading books like in Fight Club, I kind of knew the twist in Fight Club, but
like,
um in some books you're
who
like,
doesn't know the
"Oh,
twist of Fight Club?
uh yeah, and other things I'm like, "Oh, well, I get it." Like I can see the groundwork and you're like, "Oh shit." It's kind of like with Foe by Ian Reid, which I read recently.
Oh,
You can see what he's like by the time you get there, you're like, holy shit. And you look back. With this Gone to See the Riverman, I did not look back and be like, that time she said this and did this thing, holy shit, that totally he's revealing exactly the kind of person she is. I never got that from that story. And maybe it's my misreading of it, but that's the kind of stuff I need in books like that.
I guess the thing I was asking you, or I asked you this the other day, and I was hoping you would like. I guess we already kind of talked about this, but I was kind of wanting you to think about this. But like, what made this more impactful? Tender is the flat. What makes that kind of end that? What makes that ending that kind of switch? What makes that more shocking to you, I guess, for lack of a better word, than Gone to See the Riverman? Like that's kind of what I want to know.
Shocking?
Just
How like
like,
how shocking the ending is?
yeah, where you're just like, what the fuck? Like,
Well, because in Gone to See the River Man, you're given these flashbacks throughout the story, throughout the novel, right? It's not a switch that's flipped. It's like, oh, okay, she's fucking her brother. Okay, she's looking at him in the shower. You get that way before the ending, way before the ending. And so because it's peppered throughout in these flashback chapters, it loses impact. Whereas in this one, like you said, you think Marcos is going a certain way. You think he's like, oh man, he's going to go crazy. He's going to lose it. He's going to shoot people, do something. He's going to blow up a factory. Who knows? Then he doesn't do it. At the very end, you're like, what the fuck? But Augustina Bazterrica has been peppering this throughout the entire thing, right? From the beginning of the novel or thereabouts, you know he's estranged from his wife. You know he lost his child in a terrible way. You know that like family to him was the only thing keeping him sane in this fucked up world. And then what happens at the end? He gets his family back. And so that's why it makes sense. It's not like the equivalent would be uh, you read this entire book and like somewhere later in the book you're like, oh, Marcos lost his wife and his child, and here you go. This is what happened in a flashback scene. And then at the very end you see it. That would be like the Gone to See the Riverman example. Whereas in this, it's like this it's this persistent knowledge you have throughout the entire book, and it's intertwined with everything that he's going through. And so like you said, you're like, is he mourning this world, or is the only reason he's actually seems to be human because he lost his child and his wife? I don't
is he
know.
just a
And
selfish
that's the thing.
bastard the whole time, or
Or that.
does he
Yeah,
really
yeah,
just, or is he really like,
yeah.
this is fucked? You know?
Yeah, you could read it that way. You could read like, oh, holy shit. At the very end, you're like, motherfucker, this guy was a piece of shit the entire time. The only reason he seemed to be human was because he was miserable in a selfish way because he lost his family. You could read it that way. You could absolutely do it that way. Or you could read it that
Write a type of angry
the free
letter to Agustina Bazterrica.
But the flip side, the way I like to read it is that he was genuinely disturbed by this world. He was an outsider in this world. And the only way he was able to accept this world, temporarily, mind you, I don't think this is a lasting effect, was that he had this intense emotional experience of being reunited with his family, his child, his lost child, and his lost wife. And so that threw everything else out the window, in a very, very irrational way. You could read it that way. So again, I think that's what's great about this book. Anyway, it's like you can't. There's not one true answer. Maybe she knows, the writer. She probably knows, or maybe she doesn't know herself. Because a lot of times I'll write a story, and people will read it and say, "Well, what about this?" I'm like, "I don't fucking know. It could be." And I think that's the one mistake a lot of
I can
people
see you
make,
doing
is that
that.
they,
Just being
yeah,
like,
they
hey, what
think that
happened
like the
here? And everybody's
writer.
like, I don't know. Wink.
Well, I wrote this Southern Gothic story that has these very kind of supernatural undertones.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody, they read it and then they're like, "Well, was this real?" I'm like, "I don't know. Was it? What do you think? Do you want it to be real?" And I like to write it in such a way where it's ambiguous. You're like, "Is this guy crazy, or is this weird shit really happening?" And so yeah, I could totally understand if she would be like, "I don't fucking know. You figure it out." Like, I don't know. I wanted to leave it open. Because that's, to me, is the beauty of storytelling, is not having all of the answers, right? That's what nonfiction is. Nonfiction is the answers. Fiction is not having all the answers and allowing the ending or the themes to breathe and to rattle around in your mind, and you can ponder them, because that's what fiction does. Fiction makes us kind of, re-examine our own lives and our own experiences, and maybe changes people even. I think fiction can be extremely powerful in that regard. So anyway, that's that's what I think about the ending. I don't think there's one way to interpret it.
Sure. I mean, I can see what you mean with comparing it to the 1984 ending, even though Winston literally got tortured into accepting Big Brother. I guess he's just like, well, I got this thing I want, and I'm just gonna roll with it now. I could definitely
Yeah.
see him committing suicide or finally just being done with it, and I don't know, doing something extreme. But that's just me.
Yeah. Well, no, that's good, because that I think that's what's the mark of great fiction, is that you're wondering, you're thinking, you're well done reading this book. You're still thinking. We're fucking talking about it on this long ass video, right? That's what's great about this stuff. If we were talking about like something that really happened, we could still talk about it for a long time, but it'd be more like recounting the events and stuff. It wouldn't be like, what if? Well, this is what I think would happen next. It's us kind of concocting our own narratives in our head based on what she gave us or what she didn't give us. And yeah, again, mark of a great novel, in my opinion.
Is there much else for me to say about the ending? I don't know. It's kind of that was kind of what I was. I'm like, Jason, what do you think about this ending? This is kind of weird. And you were like, yeah, I remember I texted you. I'm like, well, I finished it, and you were like, uh-huh, so what'd you think? And I'm like, I have to think about it for a minute. So,
Well, I have a question for you.
what?
So, I've known you long enough, and I've seen enough of your reviews, and I know the kind of books you gravitate toward. Do you, and to me, I think I know the answer, but like, do you, books like these, right? Books like
Mm-hmm.
these that are kind of challenging, quote unquote challenging, in a way that um, it subverts your expectations of a story. It maybe goes in directions you didn't care for. Um, do you appreciate these kinds of books, or do you prefer books that are a little bit more buttoned up, and that you can kind of, once you get to the end of the page, you're kind of like, okay, I understand what happened. I get what they were trying to go for immediately, versus pondering it endlessly.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like to, I do, I do fancy myself someone who likes to challenge himself. I mean, I did I did get you to read The Vor, so I do like challenging books. But I don't know. It's a weird. I should note. I know I was kind of like I don't want to sound like I didn't like Tender is the Flesh. I think this is a great novel. I think people should go out there and read it. One of the favorites of the year, not sure yet, but definitely one that's gonna be like, yeah, I'm gonna think about this for a very long time. So, I like books I can engage with. I guess is what I like, not necessary. I mean, it doesn't
What
really
does that
matter
mean?
what.
What does that mean? Like, when you engage with? What do you mean?
Well, I mean, I don't just read to escape. I mean, don't get me wrong, I do enjoy me a good yarn where I can just kind of be like, oh yeah, this is fun, you know. Like I'll read like a Jack Reacher book or something, you know, have a good time with it. But you know, that doesn't really interest me. I like, you know, I mean, you know already, and I'm like, hey, I've read Lolita, and you're like, what? You know, I like books that that make me think, that make me feel, that make me go like, this is a different way of doing things. Like, you know, I like books that make me think. So I do like Tender as the Flesh in that regard. So, yeah.
But what would you prefer? Do you prefer the more cerebral kind of stuff like that, or do you prefer, you know, like let's say it's lighter fare, where it's, you know, it can be a complex story and have great characterization and all that stuff, but it's not necessarily trying to say a whole lot, you know? Like, I don't know, what's a book we read recently as a group together? Um, like um, Inherent Vice, you know? I'm
Oh
sure it
yeah.
has some commentary, but like it's not really trying to say something. At least I don't think it is.
Well, you didn't read far enough. You had like an
Yeah, I
episode.
mean,
You had like 2 episodes. You're like, fuck this.
yeah, I mean, well, but I mean, I didn't get the sense that it was really trying to say anything deep. I mean, it sounds like it was making like, you know, it was a satire on, I don't know, who knows, fucking the police force and hippie culture, and I have no idea, but maybe that was a bad example. Um,
Brandon Sanderson.
I'm just trying to think of something that we both read like together as like a read along.
You read The
Um,
Road. I love The Road a lot.
yeah, I think The Road too was a pretty deep book. I mean, the Vor, I guess. I don't think the Vor was incredibly deep. I think he was playing around with a lot of motifs and, you know, historical references and, you know, playing with world building. But as far as like thematically, it just didn't seem exceptionally deep.
Well, it is the first
But
of
I
a
don't know.
trilogy.
Yeah, I know. But
I digress.
or like a Joe Abercrombie. There you go. We both read that, Best Served Cold or something like that. It's just not. It's a good book. It's entertaining and there's some great characterization, but I don't feel like it doesn't have the meat. Probably the perfect word I could have chosen. Like as tender as the
Ha!
flesh does, you know?
Ha! I mean, I would disagree with you. I think there is some meat in Joe Abercrombie books.
As much meat as this?
Well, different kind of meat, I guess. You know, this is like
Human meat.
beef. Well,
Oh, so you're saying this is like
you fucking
prime beef
bastard.
and then Joe Abercrombie's like a chicken nugget kind of thing?
I don't know. Like think of Tender as a Flesh like a great steak dinner, and then think of like Joe Abercrombie as like, I don't want to say hamburger. That would make it sound like I think it's like sleazy. It's not.
Yeah,
Think
I
of
love hamburger. What are you talking about?
yeah, no, I mean hamburgers are good.
That's what
Um,
I'm saying.
Damn it, I
So a
don't know.
hamburger, let's say Joe Abercrombie's a hamburger, a great fucking cheeseburger. We both enjoy it. We both look forward to it, but we can also really appreciate a great steak dinner. So, but they're doing different
Yeah,
things.
yeah, something like that.
That's all I'm saying. That's all. So, do you prefer Crombie,
You
the
wanna
burger, or do
you
you prefer
wanna
the steak?
you want a fucking chicken nugget. I'll show you. Fucking where is it?
uh,
Pull it out. Fucking this book right here. Fucking oh jeez.
pull out
Jason's.
from your couch back there. Uh,
Oh, you kind of cut out there for a minute.
oh, did I lose you? You kind of froze.
Oh, you want to talk about what a fucking
Yeah,
chicken
you did
nugget
too.
book is? It's this fucking piece of shit right here. Fucking
Dude, I need to read that book so we can talk about it. Because I want to either we'll both hate on it and love to hate on it together, or we'll just disagree. So it'll be a fun time.
I can
I got to
see
read
you
that fucking
just
book.
like I can see you just for the lulz going like it wasn't that bad. And I'll just be like, yes, it was. Fuck you.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, Britton, you stuck too hard on this thing, man.
I don't
I'm
know.
gonna read that goddamn book. Maybe I should get the audiobook just so I can listen to it in the car or something. But
Um,
yeah.
but I don't know. It's God, you know, it's like let me think of like take like this book here would be like, oh, like if I went to like a really nice restaurant, you know, and I had like a fucking delicious meal at a like really nice restaurant, and like something like Perdido Street Station would be like a really like nice like steak that you made or something like that. I don't know. I'm probably getting lost, but you know, it. I'll
I
tell
love
you.
how we're using beef to rate these
We're
books.
using
It's
meat.
so
Yeah,
so appropriate.
we're using meat metaphors for this. I
I
don't know.
give this book 5 out of 5 steaks. Yeah.
It'll definitely make me hungry after I eat after I read this. I said fucking eat this book. I don't know, like, you know, I mean, something like Scott Lynch would be like a great hamburger or something, and like this book
Yeah.
would be like a
Yeah.
great. I don't know. I think both of them
And
have
there's not,
value.
yeah,
They have different value to me, you know.
right. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's why I was asking you, do you prefer like the Great Burger, like the Scott Lynch, or do you prefer more of the steak, like tender is the flesh?
Well, I mean, I guess the hamburger would be like more accessible, but I don't know. It's.
Hmm.
I just like things
Just your
that
mood,
engage me in
whatever your mood
general.
is.
Yeah, whatever the mood is. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, like you know, I'll think like I have like my reading taste down, and then I'll just read something that just completely just fucking, you know, like I read Suttree, and I'm like, oh, I wonder how this will go, and then I'm like, oh, this was something, you know.
Did you finish it?
I did.
You didn't review it, did you?
Not yet. No,
Okay.
that's one of
I'll
those
be
I have to
curious to
think
see.
about for a minute. Like it's weird, like there's like the books that are mainly like story, and then there's the books that like have a story but you like think about it, and then there's just like the pure vibes books, if you know what I'm talking about.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get you.
Kind of, I don't know. Oh yeah, why do I keep
Okay.
putting it over here? I need to grab it back. We're still talking about this. I don't know. That's a tough question for me to answer, because I don't even know if I know actually, because it's just like I think great books exist everywhere. You know, I think Stephen
Yeah.
King can write a book as good as I don't fucking know. I want to say Cormac McCarthy or like Vladimir Nabokov, because someone's just gonna rip my ass in the comment section like, man, Stephen King isn't that good. But you know, it's just like I think my point is I think great literature can come from anywhere. It doesn't really matter what genre it is, or you know.
No, I agree with you. But there's like you said, Abercrombie is not trying to be Augustina Bazterrica.
Well,
She's not.
no.
They're not trying to be that, and that's all I was saying. Is like I was just wondering. I tend to veer more toward the Augustina Bazterrica camp, and that's why I was wondering where you. Now, granted, I love Abercrombie sometimes too, right? I love reading that stuff, but I would say if I had to choose, I'd probably say the majority of my time I like spending in the more cerebral area, personally.
Oh yeah, I mean, I guess my difference is I tend to be cerebral about all sorts of different genres. You know, like I can, you know, like I think about the Vor in a different way than you do. You were just kind of like, you know, you were kind of just on it, and I was like, I think there's some interesting stuff here to talk about. Now, I'm not saying it's a perfect book or anything. There's definitely, you know, I don't get the fucking Muybridge stuff any less now than I did when I read it, but it's something I've thought about since I've read it.
Yeah, and that comment makes me even want to read The Devil Takes You Home even more because I would love to read a book that you fucking hate.
I'll tell you something. You know, when we had our Last of Us 2 conversation,
Uh-huh.
and you were like, you know what, you know, and I was like, this broke my heart, and you were like, you know what the part that broke my heart was, and I'm like, what it was, Jason? It was the part where, like, they tried making you empathize with Abby, and you're like, I know what they're doing. That's my issue with The Devil Takes You Home. It does
Oh, okay.
that.
Okay. I'm
And
curious, man. It's got a pretty good rating on Amazon, decent, and I like the cover. I guess we'll
yeah, you
see.
know, when you do read it, you can just have me on your channel and we can just discuss it. Like, why does this book rub you in such the wrong way?
Yeah, it'd be part of my series of like how a book has how books have impacted you. This will be a negative way though. So all of the books I've had so far on discussions have been like a positive. Now this is going to be like I fucking hated this thing.
And it
we can
sucks.
go
I
into.
wanted to like that book. It's just it didn't pan out. You know, it's just kind of.
Like
It was
Dune,
like
man. It's like Dune. I wanted to love it. I just couldn't love it. So I'm
it
gonna
was
read this
like
one sooner than later
it
because
was
I think that'd be a fun
it was
conversation.
like it was like if Jordan it was like a it's like a Jordan Peele movie, except it doesn't have all the fun, clever social commentary. It's just like message, you know, just in fucking
Ah,
italics. Or that's what I thought.
not subtle, not
Maybe,
subtle, not subtle about.
maybe you'll read
Okay.
it and be like, Britain is not that bad. But you know what? As sad as that is, I might see you doing that just to like.
No, 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 no. I think knowing you don't like it will probably force me to read it more carefully than normal because I want to see if if there are any redeeming qualities, or if it's literally like you said, it's too just on the nose, which I see that all the time, and especially in books people love. Like there'll be books people love, and I'm like, really? Fuck, man.
Like I should know, like it's not like a complete like the prose isn't bad, you know, like it's I read it, you know, it's readable. It wasn't so bad where I had to put it down, just be like, ugh, you know, like Sword of Truth, where I'm just like I can't do this shit anymore.
Sort of true. That takes me back to the 90s.
I was about to say that's another book I just don't like.
Hmm.
So there you go. Like that's my thing, Jason. It's not like I like everything. It's just I try to read books that I think I would like. And not, I'll admit, like this year has just been kind of like I've read some books I really have enjoyed, but there's been a lot of just kind of like I liked it, it was fine, you know. It's been a lot of that this
Yeah.
year. I don't think Tender as the Flesh is one of those books, but you know, this is one of those. It's kind of like the Vor, you know. I'm like, and you might bristle at this, but you know, like you know, it's one of those books I'm probably gonna be thinking about for a while, or like All the Pretty Horses. I did that with All
Yeah.
the Pretty Horses, which is also one that's stuck in my mind throughout the year.
I need to read. I need to read more McCarthy. I need to go back to McCarthy at some point because that's a series I'd really love to read.
But yeah, I think that's it. Tender as a Flesh, I think, is a really good book. I'll link Jason's review down below. You can go find his channel.
Thank you.
Jason, if you wanna just do your thing, spread your social media
Yeah.
and whatnot, feel free.
Um, okay. Thank you. Yeah, you can just catch me on here on YouTube, Jason Fuhrman. You can look my name up. You can find me in the review that Britton is going to link down below. You can also check out my books I've written on Amazon, and that's pretty much it. I don't do a lot of social media anymore. I'm kind of not
Yeah,
a
you got
fan,
kicked
but
off of Twitter for some reason.
I got yeah, my account got hacked and I got kicked off of Twitter, and I've never really. It's kind of been the best thing ever that's happened because Twitter is kind of a shit show. So
Or X. God, hate
or X, sorry, it's called X now. Yeah.
fucking hate. It's still Twitter to me. But yeah, go read Tender as the Flesh. Maybe don't watch this video before you read Tender. Like read this,
Yeah.
come
Well,
back to this video.
they're already fucked because it's the end of the video, so they've already been
um,
spoiled as hell.
Also, you might read Gone to See the Riverman as well before, because we also spoil that.
We
But
also spoiled that.
yeah, you can find me on Twitter. I don't post as much, but you know, I'll probably be ranting about. I'll be saying stuff. Find me on Goodreads and Letterboxd, where I write reviews. I'm probably more coherent than the one you just heard right now. You can find me on Discord. So yeah, I think that's it. Thanks, Jason, for joining me on this journey and
Yeah, man.
getting me to understand your psyche and why why you appreciate this ending, or why you appreciate this book so much.
What can I say?
You don't do me wrong, Jason. I'm telling you, Jason. I'll find that book one day that you'll enjoy. But you know, we'll see. Yeah, all right. Until next time.
Maybe it's The Devil Takes You Home.